Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game pod for Wolves Jazz on Saturday. We're going to talk about the Timberwolves three-point shooting, how they flipped the script in the paint during this game without Rudy Gobert, and also a well-rounded Anthony Edwards performance. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. It is a Wolves game day. But today I want to talk mostly about the Wolves-Jazz game on Saturday. Of course, the Timberwolves, building a new two-game winning streak after having 3 days off last week following the Wolves win over the Clippers on Tuesday. And no Rudy Gobert on Saturday still. The Wolves ended up turning in a strong second-half performance especially and pulled out a win. Wolves are still in Salt Lake City taking on that same Jazz team here tonight. So lots of Wolves-Jazz talk here today. Lots to get to. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch the show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. A reminder also about the postcast. Of course, we cover your team every single day, but we also give you instant episodes after every single game. Check out the Locked On Wolves postcast. You can find the audio right here on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed. You can also watch it live streaming on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Following each and every Wolves game, you get rapid reactions to all the biggest moments with the Locked On Wolves postcast. Typically, Luke Inman is the host. Occasionally, I'll sub there. And then also our friends Jack Borman and Tyler Metcalf from Canis Supis are the analysts on that show. So go check that out again live. So tonight, following Wolves Jazz live on Locked On Sports Minnesota. If you don't catch it live, you can find the audio here on Locked On Wolves. All right. Let's talk Wolves Jazz. This was, of course, coming into the game. The Timberwolves did not have, obviously, no Karl-Anthony Towns, no Rudy Gobert. Monte Morris was questionable, did end up playing for the first time in about a week and a half. He'd had that hamstring issue, I believe it was. But no Rudy was the big one. Obviously, the Jazz didn't have Lauri Markkanen. They didn't have John Collins, who sat out due to rest. So the Jazz were a bit shorthanded as well, although they were coming off and playing on a back-to-back, but they had one Friday night, beating Atlanta at home in a, I would say equal parts disappointing loss for Atlanta as it was impressive for Utah to play so hard and play well. But Utah's been okay at home despite struggling a lot recently, post-trade deadline, really. They've obviously got a good coach. They do have a bit of a home court advantage. So this was one of those, like, the Wolves should have won, but it really kind of turned out exactly what I was how I was expecting it to turn out, which was tied at halftime. Took the Wolves a little while to pull away in the second half even. They built a bit of a lead in the third quarter, but the Jazz came back again. Even early in the fourth, it was still kind of hanging in the balance. It was still a single-digit game, and then the Wolves ultimately pulled away, and we saw a bit of garbage time over the final 3-ish minutes of this one. So I want to kind of talk about, I guess, what stood out to me the most in this game. And I think the first thing is the paint and how the Wolves played in the paint. For the game, Minnesota was actually a minus 10 points in the paint. Utah had 56 points in the paint. Minnesota had only 46 points in the paint. That was a major problem early in this game. Now, first quarter, both teams were offensively challenged. Both teams scored 19 points in the first quarter, and it was more about bad shooting than it was anything else, although the Wolves were fairly active defensively. But what allowed Utah Utah scored 100 points in this game. 56 of them came in the paint. They had 18 made free throws, and they only made 6 threes, Utah did. But they made 38 two-point shots, and again, 56 points in the paint. And by the way, this is with no Markkanen, no John Collins, not like they're guys that do a ton of scoring in the paint, but those are obviously two front court players for this team that now is starting Bryce Sensabaugh and, Taylor Hendricks. Walker Kessler got the start, obviously a good player, but not going to score a ton in the paint. But yet Utah still dominated that early. The Wolves were just slow in their rotations, and that included low man help. I felt like TJ Warren had some rough moments on both ends of the floor, but especially defensively. Jaden McDaniels had some foul trouble early. He picked up 3 quick fouls in this game. And the paint protection really wasn't there early in this one. However, as the game wore on, that changed. That was really why this was a tie game at halftime, was Minnesota was just struggling to again, low man help being the biggest thing. They also allowed, for the game, 10 offensive rebounds for Utah, but it was just no resistance at the rim. And you also saw some relatively, I'll say easy shots at the rim, but like Keontae George got into the paint a little bit in this game. Off the bench, Omar Yurtseven was good for them. Micah Potter had it was a play. He got fouled and got to the line. Like guys that are fringe NBA players at best were kind of having their way with the Wolves in the paint early in this game. But that got flipped on its head as the game wore on. And that to me was the biggest thing. We'll talk about 3-point shooting. That was obviously significant too. But Utah didn't get to 100 points until garbage time because their poor 3-point shooting, and the Wolves did a good job contesting on the perimeter. But the Wolves continuously, as the game went on, started to get better and better defensively. We saw late in the game, fourth quarter especially, Naz Reid, Kyle Anderson, Anthony Edwards all get blocks in the paint when they were essentially collapsing on Utah and helping at the rim. And a couple of them ignited the fast break the other direction, which I've talked about extensively on the show over the past couple of weeks, especially post Karl-Anthony Towns injury, how the Wolves really need to get some easy offensive possessions out of transition. And they should be turning defense into offense more often. They should be running off of defensive rebounds more often. They're dead last in the league in terms of running after defensive rebounds. They're kind of middle of the pack and running after forcing turnovers. In this game, they got out in transition and were effective in transition largely because of, and again, I'm mostly talking about late in the game, largely because of the defense at the rim. They also had a couple of nice steals in this game. Utah ended up with 16 turnovers, and Minnesota scored 17 points off those 16 turnovers. And also, Minnesota had a 6-point advantage in the fast break. They scored 16 transition points. Utah only had 13 transition points. And, I mean, this is a team that, like, Utah plays faster than Minnesota. They're top 10 in pace. Minnesota's been bottom 5 in pace all season. And again, they run the least off of defensive rebounds. And I think they're currently 29th in pace. Minnesota is. So I wasn't necessarily expecting the Wolves to win in transition. And they got back those 10 points that they were behind by points of the paint, minus 10 points of the paint. They were plus 6 points in transition. So they combated some of those issues early by improving their paint defense late and turning defense into offense. Kyle Anderson had a big block. Ant had a big block. And Naz, I think each of them had one big block that turned into points, or at least a good transition opportunity going the other direction late in this game. And that was, to me, the biggest key. Obviously, 3-point shooting is a massive story, and I do want to get to it. But that slow defensive start in the paint turned into an impressive second half paint performance, turned into 19 transition points, turned into 17 points off 16 Utah turnovers in this game. So for the Wolves to win the turnover battle, what did I say? What did Utah have? 16 turnovers, and Minnesota had 9. So they won the turnover battle by 7, 16-9, and they won the transition battle by 6 points, 19-13. And that helped them fight back against the points of the paint issue early in the game. And along with that, improving that interior defense. Sans Rudy Gobert, I want to talk about Luka Garza because he had some solid moments too when it looked like he was a bit overmatched at first. He kind of came around late too and was part of that decent defense in the paint. So I want to talk about some of that next. I want to talk about Garza minutes. I want to talk about the 3-point shooting and what I really liked from Anthony Edwards in this game. So we'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion, that's billion with a B, professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. They're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. LinkedIn even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th. That's this Wednesday, just 2 days from now, at 6 Central, 7 Eastern for the best MLB season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. That's this Wednesday, the 20th at 6 Central, 7 Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, Wednesday, 6 Central, 7 Eastern, Wednesday, March 20th. On the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right. So we talked about defense. We talked about improving points, or I guess pushing back against Utah's paint offense that they had success with early in the game, and improving as the game wore on, turning defense into offense, etc. Let's talk a little bit about the Timberwolves offensively in this game. They ended up scoring 119 points on 47% shooting. They were 46% from beyond the arc, 19 for 41. They shot the ball absolutely lights out. And to me, and I'm going to kind of combine this portion of the show with the Anthony Edwards performance, and certainly we'll talk about Ant and studs and duds. But the Ant performance in this game to me was both sides of what Anthony Edwards can do. So early in this game, Minnesota was struggling to score, and Ant was just the high volume guy, right? Which we know he can be. And he really is good at it, right? Like, obviously, a good isolation player is happy to hunt shots when his team needs him to, and sometimes when the team doesn't need him to. But early in this game, they weren't scoring. So Ant took it upon himself to score, and he did. And I don't remember what he was shooting at halftime, but it wasn't super efficient, but it was effective enough that the Wolves were tied in this game against the shorthanded Jazz team. As the game wore on, Anthony Edwards turned into the facilitator, turned into the distributor. Third quarter, when the Wolves built their first double-digit lead, I think they got up 10 or 12. They were ultimately up 10 at the end of the third. And then in the fourth, as the Jazz pushed back a little bit, the Wolves had to make another run of their own. Anthony Edwards passed the ball really, really well. He only ended up with 5 assists and 5 assists and 4 turnovers. But his decision-making was really strong. There were, I think, consecutive possessions where once he was caught in the paint and kicked it out for a three-pointer. The next possession down, he had a three in the slot, but passed it to somebody. I think it was Alexander Walker in the left corner in front of the Wolves bench for a better three-point shot, a more open three-point shot. And it was the right decision-making at the right time from Anthony Edwards. And to see that, I think we've seen it pretty regularly. But in a game where the Wolves were severely shorthanded, missing two of their three best players in Rudy and Cat, Anthony Edwards could have said, you know what, I got to take on the full scoring load. I got to do all of this. And sure, he did lead the Wolves in scoring and in shots attempted, as he should. But the 5 assists were really good to see. And also, I shouldn't brush past that so quickly. I need to underscore that, because he did keep the Wolves afloat in the first half. And this was tied at halftime. But later in the game, it was the ball movement that was needed. It was the correct decision-making, the stuff Chris Finch always talks about. I believe it was Saturday's game. Bally Sports North ran a pregame package where Marnie Gellner had interviewed Chris Finch and asked what they need to do over the next, 4-ish weeks towards the close of the regular season. And one of the things he said was related to offense. Finch, I'm paraphrasing, but he said hey, we've got the talent and we have the scheme. We just need to execute and play the right way all the time, is effectively what he said. That's what this game was. Where early it was the talent of Ant keeping them afloat. And then as the game wore on, it was, all right, let's trust in the ball movement. Let's trust in some of these spot-up shooters that we have on the floor. Even though we still saw Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson combine for 0 made three-pointers, which is a trend now we've seen for over a week. Neither one of those guys has made a three. But they got a combined 14 threes from Nas, Mike Conley, and Anthony Edwards. And then off the bench, Nikhil made a couple of threes. Jeremy McLaughlin made a 3. Luka Garza made a 3. We saw other guys contributing because the ball movement was leading to these open 3-point attempts. Now, I mean, Utah's a bad defensive team, right? They're I think second to last in defensive rating on Basketball Reference. They are. They're second to last in defensive rating on Basketball Reference. They're not a good defensive team. Outside of Chris Dunn, there probably isn't a plus defender out there. I don't think. And well, Walker Kessler, I guess, but like that's kind of it, right? It's Chris Dunn, it's Walker Kessler, and a bunch of non-defenders, and they were missing some guys, obviously, in Markkanen and Jordan Clarkson's. No one's going to call him a defender, but he also wasn't playing. So scoring 119 points and 47% shooting against Utah isn't like groundbreaking, or not groundbreaking. It's not like like an otherworldly performance. Like they don't need a ton of praise for that specifically, but for a team that struggles with ball movement at times, to not get too bogged down into playing an ISO game, whether it's Ant or even Nas, the ball movement in this game was really good for Minnesota. And so related to the 3-point shooting, as I said earlier, Nas, Conley, and Ant all started in this game, or which isn't surprising for Conley and Ant, but Nas starting just the second start of the year. They combined for 14 made threes on 26 shots. So 14 to 26. Take that every day of the week. Nas started not all that good offensively, but he was contributing on the glass and defensively, and finished with a 22, 12, and 5, and had 4 made threes. So the 3-point shooting was really impressive, and Anthony Edwards' ball movement was a big part of that. Luka Garza is not going to fit into the studs and duds conversation, and this is only the second game he's played rotation minutes, so I do want to spend a quick minute talking about Luka. This was ultimately a good Luka Garza performance. It wasn't outstanding, but it was better than okay. It was like he did ultimately what the Wolves needed him to do in his 13 minutes, 11 of which I think were non-garbage minutes, or 10 of which were non-garbage minutes. His first stint was not great, end of the first quarter. And his second stint didn't start great. I mean, he got overpowered defensively, which is the biggest issue. Well, not always getting overpowered, but I worry clearly lateral quickness. He's not switchable, right? There's a reason why Luka was a second-round pick and struggled to break into the league, period. After being an all Big Ten player, or player of the year in the Big Ten Conference player of the year. But he can't get overpowered in the post. And he was early in his stint. He also, missed a couple of shots early. I think he missed his first 3-point attempts. But then he started to hold his own. And he only had 3 rebounds in 13 minutes, but they were all big rebounds. A couple of those defensive rebounds that he had in his last stint when the Wolves were pulling away, or were trying to pull away, were really impressive boards. And kind of ignited fast breaks the other way. He knocked down an open 3 at his last 3-point attempt. He hit a shot in the paint. It was ultimately a good Luka Garza performance, even if it started a little rocky. And it's a matchup that makes sense for him, right? Against Kessler, against, some of these other Micah Potter and Yurtseven. Like, these are guys that Luka Garza should be able to match up with. They're essentially G League guys, right? And not Kessler, obviously, but the other guys. And I think he did well enough in this game to more than, hold his own and hold up his end of the bargain for Minnesota. So we're not, like, when Rudy's healthy, we're not going to see Luka Garza see the floor. There's a reason he's only played rotation minutes twice this year. But he did a solid job in this game. Also of note, not going to hit studs or duds conversation in the next segment here. Monte Morris played for the first time in a week and a half after missing some games with a hamstring. He was good. Only had 2 points on 1 shot attempt in 10 minutes. And ultimately, Jordan McLaughlin got the backup point guard minutes late in this game. And I'm sure it was, I guess, I don't think Monte Morris aggravated the injury, because he did play in the second half. It's just McLaughlin played 16 minutes to Morris's 10. So, trying to get him back into game shape, get the conditioning back, not overdo it with the leg in, with the soft tissue injury for Morris. But I thought he played well in his return to the floor. And I talked a little bit about the 3-point shooting already, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker was very good in this game. 8 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, made a couple of threes, and played well in his old stomping grounds in Utah. So that was good to see too. All right, let's close the show with some individual studs and duds and what we might be able to expect against Utah here again on Monday night. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you, and it's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season as we head into springtime. Easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional. a professional stylist that can help you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just need to give your stylist your size, your style, and your budget preference. You can order your box when you want and how you want with no subscription required, and they'll send 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. You just keep what works and you send back the rest. Your stylist will always send just right pieces and the fit will be on point. It's like they have Style ESP. I don't know how they do it, but they're just going to get you. Stitch Fix makes it so easy. For those of us that don't like to shop, they can save you that time and effort. Plus, you can get outfits that make you look and feel really good. If you don't love something, you simply send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. Stitchfix.com/lockedon. All right, let's close with individual studs and duds here today. And obviously, Anthony Edwards was a stud in this game. 31, 10, and 5, plus 3 steals and 3 blocks. And in a game where he was the only high-usage offensive guy besides Naz, the 4 turnovers doesn't bother me all that much with just how much the ball was in his hands in this game. 12 of 20 shooting overall. Fantastic for, again, such a high-usage player. 5 of 7 outside the arc. Only got to the line 3 times, 2 of 3 at the line. I thought the officiating was fine in this game, although I will say they had 3 challenges in the first half between the two teams, and the officials had to overturn all 3 calls. So it was a rocky start for the refs. Oh, I should also point out, just of note, because it's something we're tracking here, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it today because the Wolves won, and I don't think the officials were a major factor either way. The Wolves only had 15 free throw attempts. The Jazz had 12 free throw attempts. No, that's not right. I said that wrong. The Jazz had 21. I looked at the 21 and said 12. The Jazz had 21 free throw attempts. The Wolves had 15. So the Wolves are a -6 in free throw attempts in this game. The Wolves continue to lose the free throw battle. Neither here nor there. No, that's not true. It is. It's. I'm not going to say neither here nor there. Since the Rudy thing a week and a half ago, or a little over a week ago, I guess, 9-10 days ago, we see this continue to happen. So in terms of made free throws, Minnesota was a -6 in made free throws in this game. Utah's a team, they do get to the line a fair amount, but they didn't have Markkanen. They didn't have Clarkson. Those are, 2 of their top 3 guys in terms of getting to the line, along with Colin Sexton. They didn't have John Collins. And yet they still attempted 21 free throws in this game. They also do a good job at not fouling defensively. So it's maybe not a shock to lose that category to Utah just because of where Utah ranks, but it's notable because remember, this is a Wolves team that did not foul a ton defensively early in the season. That's changing as the year goes on. And offensively, the Wolves are not necessarily getting to the line more often. Without Karl-Anthony Towns, it's going to be a bit of a struggle. But in this game, they were -6 in terms of both attempts and makes at the free throw line against Utah. All right. Anyway, Ant's the first stud. We talked a little bit about how early it was a higher volume, higher usage type scoring performance. Then as the game wore on, he got his teammates more involved. He did hit a couple of threes late as the Wolves were pulling away. But 31, 10, and 5, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks for Anthony Edwards in this game. Naz Reid also gets a stud. It was a bit of a slow start offensively. And, when the Wolves were kind of just hanging around at halftime, it was a tie game, I guess. But when the Wolves were failing to pull away, I guess, I was worried about Naz's performance. I don't think he played well early, but he was really good late defensively. And he did just enough offensively, a higher volume performance for Naz in this game. 22 points on 18 shot attempts, 4 of 11 outside the arc, though. So he was just 3 of 7 on 2-point attempts. He had a couple layups roll in and out. Probably could have gotten to the line maybe one or two more times than he did. 4 of 5 at the line. But the 12 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, and 0 turnovers for Naz. The 18 shots to get 22 points doesn't bother me when he has 5 assists to no turnovers. A couple of really nice passes to cutters in this game from Naz Reid. Nice bounce passes, a couple of steals, a couple of blocks. Did work on the glass in a game where ultimately the Wolves were a -7 on the glass and, again, a -10 in the paint. What Naz was able to provide was super important as the game wore on. Third stud for me in this game, it's a tough one. I think I'm going to go Mike Conley. I mean, you could argue, I guess not that tough. Mike Conley's pretty much was the other guy, right? He was second in scoring with 25 points. We barely talked about him. It was a lot of catch and shoot threes, but he also did a little bit of scoring in the paint, which we don't see a ton of from him. He was 3 of 4 on 2-point attempts. Conley was 5 of 8 outside the arc, 3 of 4 on 2s, 4 of 5 at the line. You don't see Conley get to the line 5 times very often. And what was the stat I had earlier when the Wolves played the Clippers the other night and Conley had another really good game? I think it was the Wolves haven't lost a game in which Conley scored in double figures since December 26th. And now he went for 23 against the Clippers last Tuesday and 25 against the Jazz. Good to get him 3 days of rest here in between those two games. The Wolves are going to be relying on him a lot. He's playing around 30 minutes a game here recently. Now, the Monte Morris injury had something to do with that, but McLaughlin's played well here lately too. So we'll see if the Wolves do try and get Conley a bit of rest against the Jazz, if the Wolves can hopefully build an early lead on Monday night tonight in order to get Conley a little bit more rest, because I've been nervous about this all season. And it was part of the reason for getting Monte Morris was to hopefully steal some minutes here and there for Conley to not overwork him too much. But here he was, fourth on the team in minutes in this game, playing 30 minutes, 25 points on 12 shots. A great Conley performance. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, no turnovers, per usual for Mike Conley. So those are the studs: Ant, Nas, and Mike Conley. Duds in this game: TJ Warren had a rough game. He re-signed to another 10-day contract over the weekend, and he was just 1 of 7 shooting, and a couple of those shot attempts were ill-advised in terms of the type of shots he was taking. Shot selection was not great. He did miss his only 3-point attempt. 2 points, 4 rebounds. He did have a nice offensive rebound and putback, which was his only made shot from the field in this game. Couple assists and a steal. I just didn't think TJ Warren really fit the role he needed to in this game. I'm not going to give Jaden a dud, although getting into such quick foul trouble, only playing 22 minutes, only had 1 rebound in this game, but he had 5 fouls. That wasn't great. But he had a couple of nice offensive possessions where he put the ball on the floor. He was 4 of 7 on 2-point attempts. A lot of shot. Him squeezing the trigger 9 times in 22 minutes is a lot for Jaden McDaniels, but I thought he was good enough offensively to avoid being a dud in this game. So TJ Warren's really my only dud. We've talked about everyone else rotation-wise. McLaughlin had just a good game, a strong game for him. Minot, Leonard Miller, Wendell Moore, all playing garbage time. Minot, by the way, had 5 points in 2 minutes of garbage time, knocked down a 3, hit a tough layup, a nice ball fake on fake the pass to the corner, got to the rim and scored. Hopefully there's not a situation where Minot needs to play rotation minutes, but I've been a little surprised he hasn't gotten an opportunity here in a couple of these games where we've seen Luka Garza, even Dacian Nix. Obviously Minot plays a different position, different role than those guys, but a matchup like this against the Jazz, who have a bunch of G League guys out there, if the Wolves can build something of a lead in this game on Monday night, maybe we can see some Josh Minot minutes. I don't know. It'd be nice, because I feel like he does look the part as an energy guy that can still, give you something, especially against a shorthanded team like Utah. All right. Wolves get the Jazz again here Monday night. I believe it's the last game of the series between the two. Yeah, it is the last game of the series. The Wolves have won the first 3, all by double figures. Utah, I would imagine, will be shorthanded again. We don't know for sure, but I would imagine Markkanen's still out. He's missed over a week now. John Collins will probably play. He played Friday against his old team against Atlanta in their win, and then sat Saturday. So I'd expect Collins to play. Clarkson and Markkanen are probably both truly 50-50 at best to play. So keep an eye on that. For the Wolves, I'd be surprised if Gobert didn't play. I said the same thing about Saturday, but now he'll have gotten 5 days off since the injury against the Clippers, what they're calling a rib strain now, the Wolves are. And I'm sure he wants to play. Last opportunity of the year to play in Utah. So we'll keep an eye on that for Monday night. We'll, of course, have the live postcast over on Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube, and then the audio here on Locked On Wolves. If you can't watch the game live, you can listen, of course, on SiriusXM on the SXM app. You can catch Alan Horton and every play of Wolves Jazz on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Minnesota Timberwolves. And, of course, we'll be back on Tuesday with the postgame pod for Monday night's game. Lots of stuff this week. The Wolves have a back-to-back here, Monday and then Tuesday, traveling home to take on Denver. A tough game Tuesday night on the second night of a travel back-to-back. Rest disadvantage going from altitude to basically sea level in Minnesota. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on tomorrow's show. But it's a busy week here after the Wolves played only 2 games last week. All right, that's all we have for you today here on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T Wolves, and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.